welcome. This is a series of unfortunate events. Episode 5, the Austere Academy. As they say in Final Fantasy, come start your journey, restore the light of peace to our world. But first, we must do the Dune intro.
A beginning is a very delicate time. Know then that it is the year 10,191. The known universe is ruled by the Padishah Emperor Shaddam IV, my father. In this time, the most precious substance in the universe is the spice melange. The spice extends life. The spice expands consciousness. The spice is vital to space travel. The Spacing Guild and its navigators, who the spice has mutated over 4,000 years, use the orange spice gas, which gives them the ability to fold space. That is, travel to any part of the universe without moving. Oh yes, I forgot to tell you. The spice exists on only one planet in the entire universe. A desolate, dry planet with vast deserts. Hidden away within the rocks of these deserts are a people known as the Fremen, who have long held a prophecy that a man would come, a Messiah, who would lead them to true freedom. The planet is Arrakis, also known as Dune.
Today we're going to begin our 5th book in the Lemony Snicket Unfortunate Event series, titled The Austere Academy. One. If you're going to give a gold medal to the least delightful person on the earth, you would have to give the medal to a person named Carmelita Spatz. If you didn't give it to her, Carmelita Spatz was the sort of person who would snatch it from your hand anyway. Carmelita Spatz was rude. She She was violent, and she was filthy. And it is really a shame that I must describe her to you, because there are enough ghastly and distressing things in this story without even mentioning such an unpleasant person. It is the Baudelaire orphans, thank goodness, who are the heroes of this story, not the dreadful Carmelita Spatz. And if you wanted to give a gold medal to Violet, Klaus, and Sunny Baudelaire, it would be for survival in the face of adversity. Adversity is a word which here means trouble. And there are very few people in the world who have had the sort of troubling adversity that follows these three children wherever they go. Their trouble began one day when they were relaxing at the beach and received the distressing news that their parents had been killed in a terrible fire. And so were sent to live with a distant relative named Count Olaf. If you were going to give a gold medal to Count Olaf, you would have to lock it up someplace before the awarding ceremony, because Count Olaf was such a greedy and evil man that he would try to steal it beforehand. The Baudelaire orphans did not have a gold medal, but they did have an enormous fortune that their parents had left them. And it was that fortune Count Olaf tried to snatch. The three siblings survived living with Count Olaf, but just barely. And since then, Olaf had followed them everywhere. Usually,
king of all the land. Who'd have thought that? But how did I come to this, I hear you say? And who are those strange fellows that surround my throne? I hear you also say. Well, it's a long story. Come closer, and I'll tell you. It all started yesterday. What a day that was. It's what I call a bad fur day.
Accompanied by one or more of his sinister and ugly associates. No matter who was caring for the Baudelaire, Count Olaf was always right behind them, performing such dastardly deeds that I can scarcely list them all. Kidnapping, murder, nasty phone calls, disguises, poison, hypnosis, and atrocities. Not atrocities. I used to do atrocities. Atrocious cooking are just some of the adversities the Baudelaire orphan survived in his hands. Even worse, Count Olaf had a bad habit of avoiding capture, so he was always sure to turn up again. It is truly awful that this keeps happening, but that is how the story goes.
I'm gonna be a bit late.
I only tell you that the story goes this way because you are about to become acquainted with rude, violent, filthy Carmelita Spatz, and if you can't stand reading about her, you had best put this book down and read something else, because it only gets worse from here. Before too long, Violet, Klaus, and Sunny Baudelaire will have so much adversity that being shoved aside by Carmelita Spatz will look like a trip to the ice cream store. Get out of my way, you cake strippers! Did I rude? Sorry.
It's okay.
So the rude, violent, and filthy little girl, why don't you say violent, shoving the Baudelaire orphans aside as she dashed by. Violet, Klaus, and Sunny were too startled to answer. They were standing on the sidewalk made of bricks, which must have been very old because there was a great deal of dark moss oozing from in between them. Surrounding the sidewalk was a vast brown lawn that looked like it had been that had never been watered. And on the lawn, you know. Sorry.
About backwards
Yes, we're watching so many Studio Ghibli movies in a row. Surrounding the sidewalk was a vast brown lawn that looked like it had never been watered, and on the lawn were hundreds of children running in various directions. Occasionally, someone would slip and fall to the ground, and only get back up and keep running.
Make it out.
Looking exhausted and pointless, two things that should be avoided at all costs, but the Baudelaire orphans barely glanced at the other children, keeping their eyes on the mossy bricks below them. Shyness is a curious thing, because like quicksand, it can strike people at any time. And also, like quicksand, it usually makes its victims look down. This was to be the Baudelaire's first day at Prufrock Preparatory School. And all three siblings found that they would rather look at the oozing moss than at anything else. "Have you dropped something?" Mr. Poe asked, coughing into a white handkerchief. One place the Baudelaires certainly didn't want to look was at Mr. Poe, who was walking closely behind them. Mr. Poe was a banker who had been placed in charge of the Baudelaires' affairs following the terrible fire, and this had turned out to be a lousy idea. Mr. Poe meant well, but a jar of mustard probably also means well, and would do a better job of keeping the Baudelaires out of danger. Violet, Klaus, and Sunny had long ago learned that the only thing they could count on from Mr. Poe was that he was always coughing. "No," Violet replied, "we haven't dropped anything." Violet was the oldest Baudelaire, and usually she was not shy at all. Violet liked to invent things, and one could often find her thinking hard about her latest invention, with her hair tied up in ribbon to keep it out of her eyes. When her inventions were done, she liked to show them to people she knew, who were usually very impressed with her skill. Right now, she looked down at the mossy bricks. She thought of a machine she could build that could keep moss from growing on the sidewalk, but she felt too nervous to talk about it. What if none of the teachers, children, or administrative staff were interested in her invention? As if he were reading her thoughts, Klaus put a hand on Violet's shoulder, and she smiled again. Klaus had known for all 12 of his years that his sister found a hand on her shoulder comforting, as long as the hand was attached to an arm, of course. Normally, Klaus would have said something comforting as well, but he was feeling as shy as his sister. Most of the time, Klaus could be found doing what he liked to do best, which was reading. Some mornings, one could find him in bed with his glasses on because he had been reading so late that he was too tired to take them off. Klaus looked down at the sidewalk and remembered a book he had read called Moss Mysteries, but he felt too shy to bring it up. What if Prufrock Preparatory School had nothing great to read? Sunny, the youngest Baudelaire, looked up at her siblings, and Violet smiled and picked her up. This was easy to do because Sunny was a baby, and only a little bit larger than a loaf of bread. Sunny was always too nervous to say anything, although it was often difficult to understand what she said when she did speak. For instance, if Sunny had been feeling so shy, she might have opened her mouth, revealing her 4 sharp teeth, and said, "Marimo," which may have meant, "I hope there are plenty of things to bite at school, because biting things is one of my favorite things to do." "I know why you're all so quiet," Mr. Poe said. "It's because you're so excited." And I don't blame you. I always wanted to go to boarding school when I was younger, but I never had the chance. I'm a little jealous of you, if you want to know the truth. The Baudelaires looked at one another. The fact that Prufrock Preparatory School was a boarding school was the part that made them feel the most nervous. If no one was interested in inventions, or there was nothing to read, or biting wasn't allowed, they were stuck there, not only all day, but all night as well. The siblings wished that if Mr. Poe were really jealous of them, he would attend Prufrock Preparatory School himself, and they could work at the bank. "You're very lucky to be here," Mr. Poe continued. "I had to call more than 4 schools before I found one that could take all 3 of you in such short notice." Prufrock Prep, that's what they call it. As a sort of nickname, it's a very fine academy. The teachers all have advanced degrees. The dormitory rooms are all finely furnished, and most important of all, there is an advanced computer system which will keep Count Olaf away from you. Vice Principal Nero told me that Count Olaf's complete description, everything about his one long eyebrow to the tattoo of the eye on his left ankle, had been programmed into the computer, so you three should be safe here for the next several years. I'm sorry, I keep rolling my eyes. I apologize.
It's okay.
But how
Bygones.
can a computer keep Count Olaf away? Violet asked in a puzzled voice, still looking down at the ground. It's an advanced computer, Mr. Poe said, as if the word advanced were a proper explanation instead of a word meaning. Having attained advancement, don't worry your little head about Count Olaf. Vice Principal Nero has promised me that he will keep a close eye on you. After all, a school as advanced as Prufrock wouldn't allow people to simply run around loose. Look, cake sniffers, the rude Violet and filthy little girl said as she dashed past them again. What does cake sniffer mean? Violet murmured to Klaus, who had an enormous vocabulary from all his reading. I don't know, Klaus admitted, but it doesn't sound very nice. What a charming word that is, Mr. Poe said. Cake sniffers. I don't know what it means, but it reminds me of pastry. Oh well, here we are. They had come to the end of the mossy brick sidewalk and stood in front of the school. The Baudelaires looked up at their new home and gasped in surprise. Had they not been staring at the sidewalk the whole way across the lawn, they would have seen what the academy looked like. But perhaps it was best to delay looking at it for as long as possible. A person who designs buildings is called an architect. But in the case of Prufrock, a better term might be depressed architect. The school was made up of several buildings, all made of smooth gray stone, and the buildings were grouped together in a sort of sloppy line. To get to the buildings, the Baudelaires had to walk beneath it and had to walk beneath an immense stone arch casting a curved shadow on the lawn, like a rainbow in which all the colors were gray and black. On the arch were the words Prufrock Preparatory School in enormous black letters, and then in smaller letters the motto of the school, Memento Mori. But it was not the building or the arch that made the children gasp. It was how the buildings were shaped, rectangular, but with a rounded top. A rectangle with a rounded top is a strange shape, and the orphans could only think of one thing with that shape. To the Baudelaires, each building looked exactly like a gravestone. Rather odd architecture, Mr. Poe commented. Each building looks like a tomb. In any case, you are to report to Vice Principal Nero's office immediately. It's on the 9th floor of the main building. Aren't you coming with us, Mr. Poe? Violet asked. Violet was 14, and she knew that 14 was old enough to go to somebody's office by herself, but she felt nervous about walking into such a sinister-looking building without an adult nearby. Mr. Poe coughed into his handkerchief and looked at his wristwatch at the same time. I'm afraid not, he said when his coughing passed. The banking day has already begun, but I've talked over everything with Vice Principal Nero, and if there's any problem, remember, you can always contact me or any of my associates at Mortuary Money Management. Now off you go. Have a wonderful time at Prufrock Prep. I'm sure we will, said Violet, sounding much braver than she felt. Thank you for everything, Mr. Poe. Yes, thank you, Klaus said, shaking the banker's hand. Triplets, Sunny said, which was her way of saying thanks. You're welcome, all of you, Mr. Poe said. So long. He nodded at all three Baudelaires, and Violet, Sunny watched him walk back down the mossy sidewalk, carefully avoiding the running children. But Klaus didn't watch him. Klaus was looking at the enormous arch over the academy. Maybe I don't know what cake sniffer means, Klaus said, but I think I can translate our new school's motto. It doesn't even look like it's in English, Violet said, peering up at it. Rancho, Sunny agreed. It's not, Klaus said. It's in Latin. Many mottos are in Latin for... Oh, I thought that word was going to be in Latin. Forgive me. Many mottos are in Latin. For some reason, I don't know very much Latin, but I do remember reading this phrase in a book about the Middle Ages. If it means that what I think it means, it's certainly a strange motto.
Festina
What do
lente
you think it means? Violet asked. If I'm not mistaken,
Go quickly,
Klaus said,
slowly, or something weird
said
like that.
Klaus, who was rarely mistaken. Memento Mori means remember, you will die. No.
Festina lente was from Dracula.
Expect us to believe that that's okay. Remember, you will die, Violet repeated.
It would seem to
Quickly.
Please give me just what I need at that moment in time.
Quietly, and the three siblings stepped closer to one another, as if they were very cold. Everybody will die? Of course, sooner or later. Circus performers will die, and clarinet experts will die, and you and I will die, and there might be a person who lives on your block right now who is not looking both ways before he crosses the street, and who will die in just a few seconds, all because of a bus. Everybody will die. But very few people want to be reminded of the fact. The children certainly did not want to remember that they would die, particularly as they walked beneath the arch over Prufrock Press. The Baudelaire orphans did not need to be reminded of this as they began their first day in the giant graveyard that was now their home. Alright, great first chapter, I guess. It was, mostly.
If there's one thing I've learned from my years of being a kid, it's that you have zero control over your own life.
As the Baudelaire orphans stood outside Vice Principal Nero's door, they were reminded of something their father said to them just a few months before he died. One evening, the Baudelaire parents had gone out to hear an orchestra play, and the three children had stayed by themselves in the family's mansion. The Baudelaires had something of a routine on nights like this. First, Violet and Klaus would play a few games of checkers while Sunny ripped up some old newspapers, and then the three children could read in the library until they fell asleep on comfortable sofas. When their parents came home, they would wake up the sleeping children, talk to them a little about the evening, and send them off to bed. But on this particular night, the Baudelaire parents came home early, and the children were still up reading, or, in Sunny's case, looking at the pictures. The siblings' father stood in the doorway of the library and said something they never forgot. "Children," he said, "there is no worse sound in the world than somebody who cannot play the violin, who insists on doing so anyways. At the time, the Baudelaires had merely giggled. But as they listened outside the vice principal's door, they realized that their father had been absolutely right. When they first approached the heavy wooden door, it sounded like a small animal was having a temper tantrum. But as they listened more closely, the children realized it was somebody who could not play the violin, insisting on doing so anyway. The sound shrieked and hissed and scratched and moaned and made other horrible sounds that are really impossible to describe. And finally, Violet could take it no longer and knocked on the door. She had to knock very hard and at length in order to be heard over the atrocious violin recital going on inside. But at last the wooden door opened with a creak, and there stood a man, a tall man, with a violin under his chin and an angry glare in his eyes. Already? Okay. Who dares interrupt a genius when he is rehearsing? He asked in a voice so loud and booming that it was enough to make anyone shy all over again. The Baudelaires, Klaus said quickly, looking at the floor. Mr. Poe said we could come right. Mr. Poe said to come right to Vice Principal Nero's office. Mr. Poe said to come right to Vice Principal Nero's office, the man mimicked, in a high, shrieking voice. Well, come in, I don't have all afternoon. The children stepped into the office and got a better look at the man who mocked them. He was dressed in a rumpled brown suit that had something sticky on his pocket. And he was wearing a tie decorated with pictures of snails. His nose was very small and very red, as if somebody had stuck a cherry tomato in the middle of a splotchy face. He was almost completely bald, but he had 4 tufts of hair, which he had tied into little pigtails. With some old rubber bands. The modelers had never seen anybody who looked like him before, and they weren't particularly interested in looking at him any further. But his office was so small and bare that it was difficult to look at anything else. There was a small desk with a small metal chair behind it and a small metal lamp to one side. The office had one window decorated with curtains that matched the man's tie. The only other object in the room was a shiny computer which sat in the corner of the room like a toad. The computer had a blank gray screen and several buttons as red as the pigtailed man's nose. Ladies and gentlemen, the man announced in a loud voice, Vice Principal Nero. There was a pause, and the 3 children looked around in the tiny room, wondering where Nero had been hiding all this time. Then they looked back at the man with the pigtails, who was holding both hands up in the air. His violin and his bow almost touched the ceiling, and they realized that the man he had just introduced so grandly was himself. Nero paused for a moment and looked down at the baudelaires. It is traditional, he said sternly, to applaud when a genius has been introduced. Just because somebody is traditional is no reason to do it, of course. Piracy, for example, is tradition that has been carried on for hundreds of years. But that doesn't mean we should all attack ships and steal their gold. But Vice Principal Nero looked so ferocious that the children felt this was a nice time to honor tradition. So they began clapping their hands and didn't stop. Until Nero took several bows and sat down in his chair. Sorry when I giggle at weird points. I just foresee things coming sometimes.
Oh, don't worry about it, man.
Okay, thank you very much, and welcome to Prufrock Preparatory School. Blah, blah, blah. He said, using the word blah to mean that he was too bored to finish his sentence properly. I'm certainly doing Mr. Poe a favor in taking on 3 orphans at such short notice. He assured me that you won't cause any trouble, and I did a little research of my own. You've been sent to legal guardian after legal guardian, and adversity has always followed. Adversity means trouble, by the way. In our case, Klaus said, not pointing out that he already knew what the word adversity meant. Adversity means Count Olaf. He was the cause of all the trouble with our guardians. He was the cause of all the trouble with our guardians. Nero said in his nasty mimicking way, I'm not interested in your problems, quite frankly. I am a genius and have no time for anything other than playing the violin. It's depressing enough that I have to take this job as vice principal because not a single orchestra appreciates my genius. I'm not going to depress myself further by listening to the problems of 3 bratty children. Anyway, look up narcissist. It's obviously one. That's a good word. Alright, I'm not going to depress myself further by listening to the problems of 3 bratty children. Anyway, here at Prufrock Prep, there'll be no blaming your own weaknesses on Count Olaf, this Count Olaf person. Look at this. Vice Principal Nero walked over to the computer and pressed 2 buttons over and over again. The screen lit up with a light green glow, as if it were seasick. This is an advanced computer, Nero said. Mr. Poe gave me all the necessary information about the man you call Count Olaf, and I programmed it into the computer, see? Nero pressed another button and a small picture of Count Olaf appeared on the computer screen. Now that the advanced computer knows about him, you don't have to worry. But how can a computer keep Count Olaf away, Klaus asked. He could still show up and cause trouble no matter what appears on the computer screen. I shouldn't bother trying to explain this to you, Vice Principal Nero said. There's no way uneducated people like yourself can understand a genius like me. Well, Prufrock, we'll take care of that. You'll get an education here if we have to break both your arms to do it. Speaking of which, I'd better show you around. Come here to the window. The butler orphans walked to the window and looked down at the brown lawn. From the 9th floor, all the children running around looked like tiny ants, and the sidewalk looked like a ribbon somebody had thrown away. Nero stood behind the siblings and pointed at things with the violin. Now, this building you're in is the administrative building. It is completely off limits to students. Today is your first day, so I'll forgive you. But if I see you here again, you will not be allowed to use silverware at any of your meals. That gray building over there contains the classrooms. Violet, you will be studying with Mr. Remora in room 1. And Klaus, you will be studying with Mrs. Bass in room 2. Can you remember that? Room 1 and room 2. If you don't think you can remember, I have a self-tip marker and I will write room 1 and room 2 on your hand in permanent ink. We can remember, Violet said quickly. But which classroom is Sunny? Vice Principal Nero drew himself up to his full height, which in this case was 5 feet 10 inches. Prufrock Preparatory School is a serious academy, not a nursery school. I told Mr. Poe that we would have room for a baby here, but we do not have a classroom for her. Sunny will be employed as my secretary. Ridiculous. Oh my goodness. So cute. Okay. But Sunny's a baby, Klaus said. Babies aren't supposed to have jobs. Babies aren't supposed to have jobs. Okay. Nero's response was so predictable that the Baudelaire orphans could have said it along with the miserable administrator. Where do we live? He said in his high, mocking tone. Yes, I can. Okay, mimicking again, then continued. Alright, babies aren't supposed to have jobs. Nero mimicked again, and then continued. Well, babies aren't supposed to be at boarding schools either, Nero pointed out. Nobody can teach a baby anything, so she'll work for me. All she has to do is answer the phone and take care of paperwork. It's not very difficult, and it's an honor to work for a genius, of course. Now, if either of you are late for class, or Sunny is late for work, your hands will be tied together behind your back for meals. You'll have to lean down and eat your food like a dog. Of course, Sunny will always have her silverware taken away because she will work in the administrative building where she's not allowed. That's not fair, Violet cried. That's not fair. Oh, wait. That's not fair, Violet cried. That's not fair. The vice principal screams back at her. The stone building over there contains the cafeteria. Meals are served promptly at breakfast time, lunchtime, and dinner time. If you're late, we take away your cups and glasses, and your beverages will be served to you in a large puddle. Just imagine the author sitting around thinking of people. The rectangle building over there with the rounded top is the auditorium. Every night, I give a violin recital for 6 hours. That's enough. Okay. I give a violin recital for 6 hours, and attendance is mandatory. Of course it is. The word mandatory means that if you don't show up, you have to buy me a large bag of candy and watch me eat it. The lawn serves as our sports facility. Our regular gym teacher, Ms. Hench, accidentally fell off of a third-story window a few days ago. But we have a replacement who should arrive shortly. Oh. In the meantime, I've instructed the children just to run around as fast as they can during gym time. I think that just about covers everything. Are there any questions? Could anything be worse than this, was the question Sunny had, but she was too well-mannered to ask this. Are you kidding about all these incredible cruel punishments and rules, was the question Klaus thought of, but he already knew that the answer was no. Only Violet thought of a question that seemed useful to ask. I have a question, Vice Principal Nero. She said, where do we live? Nero's response was so predictable that the Baudelaire orphans could have said it along with the miserable administrator. Where do we live? He said in his high mocking tone, but when he was done making fun of the children, he decided to answer it. We have a magnificent dormitory here at Prufrock Prep, he said. You can't miss it. I can already guess what he's about to say. It's a gray building, entirely made of stone and shaped like a big toe. I actually didn't see that coming. Inside is a huge living room with a brick fireplace, a game room, and a large lending library. Every student has his or her own room with a bowl of fresh fruit placed there every Wednesday. Doesn't that sound nice? Yeah, yes it does, Klaus admitted. Keep! Sunny shrieked, which meant something along the lines of, I like fruit. I'm glad you think so, Nero said, although you won't get to see much of the place. In order to live in the dormitory, you must have a permission slip with the signature of a parent or a guardian. Your parents are dead. And Mr. Poe tells me that your guardians have either been killed or have fired you. But surely, Mr. Poe can sign our permission slip, Violet said. He surely cannot, Nero replied. He is neither your parent nor your guardian. He is a banker who is in charge of your affairs. But that's more or less the same thing, Klaus protested. That's more or less the same thing, Nero mimicked. Perhaps after a few semesters at Prufrock Prep, you'll learn the difference between a parent and a banker. No, I'm afraid you'll have to live in a small shack made entirely of tin. Inside there's no living room, no game room, and no lending library whatsoever. You three will each have your own bale of hay to sleep on, but no fruit. It's a dismal place, but Mr. Poe tells me that you've had a number of uncomfortable experiences, so I figured you'd be used to such things. Couldn't you please make an exception, Violet asked. I'm a violinist, Nero cried. I have no time to make exceptions. I'm too busy practicing the violin. So, if you will kindly leave my office, I can get back to work. Klaus opened his mouth to say something more, but when he looked at Nero, he knew that there was no use saying another word to such a stubborn man, and he glumly followed his sisters out of the vice principal's office. When the office door shut behind them, however, Vice Principal Nero said another word, and he said it 3 times. The 3 children listened to these 3 words that he had said and knew for certain that he had not been sorry at all. For as soon as the Baudelaires left the office and Nero thought he was alone, he said to himself, Now the vice principal of Prufrock Cafeteria School did not actually say the syllable he, of course. Whenever you see the words he in a book, or ha, or har, or hey, or even ho, those words mean somebody was laughing. In this case, however, the words he cannot really describe what Vice Principal Nero's laugh sounded like. The laugh was squeaky, and it was wheezy, and it had a rough crackling edge to it, as if Nero were eating tin cans as he laughed at the children. But most of all, the laugh sounded cruel. It is always cruel to laugh at people, of course, although sometimes, if they are wearing an ugly hat, it is hard to control yourself. But the Baudelaires were not wearing ugly hats. They were young children receiving bad news, and if Vice Principal Nero really had to laugh at them, we should have been able to control, if he really had to laugh at them, he should have been able to control himself until the siblings were out of earshot. But Nero didn't care about controlling himself, and as the Baudelaire orphans listened to the laugh, they realized that what their father had said to them that night when he'd come home from the symphony was wrong. There was a worse sound in the world than somebody who cannot play the violin insisting on doing so anyway. The sound of an administrator laughing, a squeaky, wheezy, rough, crackling, cruel laugh at children who have to live in a shack was much, much worse. So as I hide out here in this mountain cabin and write these words, he, and you, wherever you are hiding out, reading the words he, you should know that he stands for the worst sound the Baudelaires have ever heard. Hilarious chapter. The expression making a mountain out of a molehill simply means making a big deal out of something that is actually a small deal. And it is easy to see how this expression came about. Molehills are simply mounds of earth serving as condominiums for moles. And they have never caused anyone any harm except for maybe a stub toe if you were walking through the wilderness without any shoes on. Mountains, however, are very large mounds of earth and are constantly causing problems. They are very tall, and when people try to climb them, they often fall off or get lost and die of starvation. Sometimes countries fight over who really owns a mountain, and thousands of people have to go to war and come home grumpy or wounded. And of course, mountains serve as homes to mountain goats and mountain lions, who enjoy attacking helpless picnickers and eating sandwiches or children. So when someone is making a mountain out of a molehill, they are pretending that something is as horrible as war or a ruined picnic, when it is really only as horrible as a stub toe. Ruined picnic, really? That's what's wrong with that? Okay. When the Baudelaire orphans reached the shack where they were going to live, however, they realized that Vice Principal Nero hadn't been making a mountain out of a molehill at all, when he had said that the shack was a dismal place. If anything, he had been making a molehill out of a mountain. It was true that the shack was tiny, as Nero had said, and made of tin, and it was true that there was no living room, no game room, and no lending library. It was true that there were 3 bales of hay instead of beds, and that there was absolutely no fresh fruit in sight. But Vice Principal Nero had left out a few details in his description, and it was these details that made the shack even worse. The first detail the Baudelaires noticed was that the shack was infested with small crabs. Oh my. Each one the size of a matchbox, scurrying around the wooden floor with their tiny claws snapping at the air. As the children walked across the shack to sit glumly on one of the bales of hay, they were disappointed to see that the crabs were territorial, a word which here means unhappy to see small children in their living quarters. The crabs gathered around the children and began snapping their claws at them. Luckily, the crabs did not have very good aim, and luckily their claws were so small that they probably wouldn't hurt any more than a good strong pinch. But even if they were more or less harmless, they did not make for a good shack. Let's try this again. Harmless, they did not make for a good shack. When the children reached the bale of hay and sat down, tucked their legs up under them to avoid the snapping crabs, they looked up at the ceiling and saw another detail Nero had neglected to mention. Some sort of fungus was growing on the ceiling, a fungus that was light tan and quite damp. Every few seconds, small drops of moisture would fall from the fungus with a pop, and the children had to duck to avoid getting light tan fungus juice on them. Like the small crabs, the plopping fungus did not appear to be very harmful, but also, like the small crabs, the fungus made the shack even more uncomfortable than the vice principal had described it. And lastly, as the children sat on the bale of hay with their legs tucked beneath them and ducked to avoid fungus juice, they saw one harmless but unpleasant detail of the shack that was worse than Nero had led them to believe, and that was the color of the walls. Each tin wall was bright green, with tiny pink hearts painted here and there, as if the shack were an enormous tacky Valentine's Day card instead of a place to live. And the Baudelaires found that they would rather look at the bales of hay or the small crabs on the floor, or even the light tan fungus on the ceiling down the ugly walls. Overall, the shack was too miserable to serve as a storage place for old banana peels, let alone a home for 3 young people, and I confess that if I had been told that it was my home, I probably would have lain on the bales, on the bales of hay and thrown a temper tantrum. Yeah, that makes sense. But the Baudelaires had learned long ago that temper tantrums, however fun they may be to throw, rarely solve whatever problem is causing them. So after a long, miserable silence, the orphans tried to look at their situation in a more positive light. This isn't such a nice room, Violet said finally. But if I put my mind to it, I bet I can invent something that can keep these crowds away from us. And I'm going to read up on the light hand fungus, Klaus said. Maybe the dormitory library has information on how to stop it from dripping. Ibero, sir, Sonny said, which meant something like, I bet I can use my 4 sharp teeth to scrape the paint away and make the walls a bit less ugly. Sonny shouldn't do that. Klaus gave his baby sister a little kiss on the top of her head. At least we get to go to school, he pointed out. I've missed being in a real classroom. Me too, Violet agreed. And at least we'll meet some people our own age. We've only had the company of adults for quite some time. Want it, Sonny said, which probably meant, and learning secretarial skills is an exciting opportunity for me, although I should really be in nursery school instead. That's true, Klaus said, and who knows, maybe the advanced computer really can help keep Count Olaf away. And that's the most important thing of all. You're right, Violet said. And any room that doesn't have Count Olaf in it is good enough for me. Oh no, Sonny said, which meant even if it's ugly, damp, and filled with crabs. The children sighed and then sat quietly for a few moments. The shack was quiet except for the snapping of the tiny turtle claws, the plop of fungus, and the sighs of the Baudelaires as they looked at the ugly wall. Try as they might, the youngsters just couldn't make the shack into a molehill. No matter how much they thought of real classrooms, people their own age, or exciting opportunities of secretarial skills, their new home seemed much, much worse than even the sorest of stuffed toast. Well, Klaus said after a while, it feels like it's about lunchtime. Remember, if you're late, they take away our cups and glasses, so we should probably get moved on. Those rules are ridiculous, Violet said, ducking to avoid a plot. Lunchtime isn't a specific time, so you can't be late for it. It's just a word that means around lunch. I know, Klaus said. And the part about Sonny being punished for going to the administrative building when she has to go there to be Nero's secretary is completely absurd. Help, Sonny said, putting her little hand on her brother's knee. She meant something like, don't worry about it, I'm a baby. So I hardly even use silverware. It doesn't matter that they'll take it away from me. Ridiculous rules or not, the orphans did not want to be punished. So the 3 of them walked gingerly, and the word gingerly here means avoiding territorial crabs, across the shack and out onto the brown lawn. Gym class must have been over because all of the running children were gone, and this only made the Baudelaires walk even more quickly to the cafeteria. Several years before this story took place, when Violet was 10 and Klaus was 8, and Sonny was not even a fetus, the Baudelaire family went to the country fair in order to see a pig that their uncle, Elwin, had entered in a contest. The pig contest turned out to be a bit dull, but in the neighboring tent there was another contest that the family found quite interesting. The biggest lasagna contest. The lasagna that won the blue ribbon had been baked by 11 nuns and was as big and soft as a large mattress. Perhaps because they were at such an impressionable age, the phrase impressionable age here means 10 and 8 years old, respectively. Violet and Klaus always remembered this lasagna, and they were sure they would never see another one anywhere near as big. Violet and Klaus were wrong. When the Baudelaires entered the cafeteria, they found a lasagna waiting for them that was the size of a dance floor. It was sitting on top of this enormous trivet to keep it from burning the floor, and the person serving it was wearing a thick metal mask as protection, so that the children could only see their eyes peeking out from the tiny hole. The stunned Baudelaires got into a long line of children and waited their turn for the metal masked person to scoop lasagna onto ugly plastic trays and hand it wordlessly to the children. After receiving the lasagna, the orphans walked further down the line and helped themselves to green salad, which was waiting for them in a bowl the size of the pickup truck. Next to the salad was a mountain of garlic bread, and at the end of the line was another metal masked person handing out silverware to the students who had not been inside the administrative building. The Baudelaires said thank you to the person who gave them a slow metallic nod in return. They took a long look around the crowded cafeteria. Hundreds of children had already received their lasagna, and were sitting at long rectangular tables. The Baudelaires saw several other children who had undoubtedly been in the administrative building because they had no silverware. They saw several more students who had their hands tied behind their backs as punishment for being late to class. And they saw several students who had sad looks on their faces, as if they had been forced to buy somebody a bag of candy and watch them eat it. And the orphans guessed that these students had failed to show up to one of Nero's 6-hour concerts. But it was none of these punishments that made the Baudelaire orphans pause for so long. It was the fact that they did not know where to sit. Cafeterias can be confusing places because there are different rules for each one, and sometimes it is difficult to know where one should eat. Normally the Baudelaires would simply eat with one of their friends, but their friends were far, far away from Prufrock preparatory school, and Violet, Klaus, and Sunny gazed around the cafeteria full of strangers and thought they might never put down their ugly trick. Finally, they caught the eye of the girl that they had seen on the lawn, who had called them such a strange name, and walked a few steps towards her. Now, you and I know that this loathsome little girl was Carmelita Spatz, but the Baudelaires had not been properly introduced to her, and so did not realize just how loathsome she was. Although, as the orphans drew closer, she gave them an instant education. Don't even think of eating around here, you cake sniffers, Carmelita Spatz cried, and several of her rude, filthy, violent friends nodded in agreement. Nobody wants to have lunch with people who live in the orphan shack. I'm terribly sorry, Klaus said, although he wasn't terribly sorry at all. I didn't mean to disturb you. Carmelita, who had apparently never been to the administrative building, picked up her silverware and began to bang it on her tray in a rhythmic and irritating way. Cake sniffing orphans in the orphan shack. Cake sniffing orphans in the orphan shack, she chanted, and to the Baudelaire's dismay, many other children joined right in. Like many other rude, violent, filthy people, Carmelita Spatz had a bunch of friends, it's true, who were always happy to help her torment people, probably to avoid being tormented themselves. Also.
I'd rather eat a bowl of vampire bats
like the entire cafeteria
than spend any time with Carmelita Flats.
Sniffing orphans in the orphan shack. The three siblings stepped closer, craning their necks to see if there was any possible place to which they could escape and eat their lunch in peace. Or leave them alone, Carmelita, a voice cried over the chanting. The Baudelaires turned around and saw a boy with very dark hair and very wide eyes. He looked a little older than Klaus and a little younger than Violet, and had a dark green notebook tucked into the pocket of his thick wool sweater. You're the cake sniffer, and nobody in their right mind would want to eat with you anyway. Come on, the boy said, turning to the Baudelaires. There's room at our table. Thank you very much, Violet said in relief, and followed the boy to the table that had plenty of room. He sat down next to the girl who looked absolutely identical to the boy. She looked around the same age and also had very dark hair, very wide eyes, and a notebook tucked into the pocket of her thick wool sweater. The only difference seemed to be that the girl's notebook was pitch black. Seeing two people who looked so much alike is a little bit eerie, but it was better than looking at Carmelita Spatz, so the Baudelaires sat down across from them and introduced themselves. I'm Violet Baudelaire, said Violet Baudelaire, and this is my brother Klaus and our baby sister, Sunny. Nice to meet you, said the boy. My name is Duncan Quagmire, And this is my sister, Isadora. And the girl who was yelling at you, I'm sorry to say, is Carmelita Spatz. She didn't seem very nice, Klaus said. That is an understatement of the century, Isadora said. Carmelita Spatz is rude, filthy, and violent. And the less time you spend with her, the happier you will be. Read the Baudelaire the poem you wrote about her, Duncan said to his sister. You write poetry, Klaus asked. He had read a lot about poets, but had never met one. Just a little bit, Isadora said modestly. I write poems down in this notebook. It's an interest of mine. Sappho! Sunny shrieked, which meant something like, I'd be very pleased to hear a poem of yours. Klaus explained to the Quagmires what Sunny meant, and Isadora smiled and opened her notebook. It's a very short poem, she said, only 2 rhyming lines. That's called a couplet, Klaus said. I learned that from a book of literary criticism. Yes, I know, Isadora said, and then read her poem, leaning forward so Carmelita Spatz would not overhear. I would rather eat a bowl of vampire bats than spend an hour with Carmelita Spatz.
An hour.
The Baudelaires giggled and then covered their mouths so nobody would know that they were laughing at Carmelita. That was great, Klaus said. I like the part about the bowl of bats. Thank you, Isadora said. I would be interested in reading that book of literary criticism you told me about. Would you let me borrow it? Klaus looked down. I can't, he said. That book belongs to my father, and it was destroyed in the fire. The Quagmires looked at one another, and their eyes grew even wider. I'm very sorry to hear that, Duncan said. My sister and I have been through a terrible fire, so we know what it's like. Did your father die in the fire? Yes, he did, Klaus said, and my mother, too. Isadora put down her fork, reached across the table, and patted Klaus on the hand. Normally, this might have embarrassed Klaus a little bit, but under the circumstances, it felt perfectly natural. I'm so sorry to hear that, she said. Our parents died in a fire as well. It's awful to miss your parents so much, isn't it? Lonely, Sunny said, nodding. For a long time, Duncan admitted, I was afraid of any kind of fire. I didn't even like to look at stoves. Violet smiled. We stayed with a woman for a while, our Aunt Josephine, who was afraid of stoves. She was afraid that they might explode. Explode, Duncan said? Even I wasn't afraid of that. Why aren't you staying with your Aunt Josephine now? Now it was Violet's turn to look down, and Duncan's turn to reach across the table and take her hand. She died too, Violet said. To tell you the truth, Duncan, our lives have been very topsy-turvy for quite some time. I'm very sorry to hear it, Duncan said, and I wish I could tell you that things will get better here. But between Vice Principal Nero's playing the violin, Carmelita Spatz teasing us, and the dreadful orphan shack, Prufrock Prep is a very miserable place. I think it's awful to call it the orphan shack, Klaus said. It's a bad enough place without giving it an insulting name. The name is more of Carmelita's handiwork. I'm sorry to say, Isadora said. Duncan and I had to live there for 3 semesters because we needed a parent or guardian to sign our permission slip, and we didn't have one. That's the same thing that happened to us, Violet cried, and when we asked Nero to make an exception, he said he was too busy practicing the violin, Isadora said, nodding as she finished Violet's sentence. He always says that. Anyway, Carmelita called it the orphan shack when we were living there, and it looks like she's going to keep on doing it.
I'm a violinist.
Well, Violet sighed, Carmelita's nasty names are the least of our problems. In the shack. How did you deal with the crabs when you lived there? Duncan let go of her hand to take his notebook out of his pocket. I use my notebook to take notes on things, he explained. I plan to be a newspaper reporter when I get a little older, and I figure it's good to start practicing. Here it is, notes on crabs. They're afraid of loud noises, you see, so I have a list of things we did to scare them away from us. Afraid of loud noises, Violet repeated, and tied her hair up in a ribbon to keep it out of her eyes. When she ties her hair up like this, or like that, Klaus explained to the Quagmires, it means she's thinking of an invention. My sister is quite an inventor. How about noisy shoes, Violet said suddenly. If we took small pieces of metal and glued them to our shoes, then whenever we walked, it would make a noise, and I bet we'd hardly ever see those crabs. Noisy shoes, Duncan cried. Isadora and I lived in the orphan shack all that time, and never thought of noisy shoes. He took a pencil out of his pocket and wrote noisy shoes in the dark green notebook, and then turned a page. I do have a list of fungus books that are in the school library if you need help with that tan stuff on the ceiling. Zachwall! Sunny shrieked. We'd love to see the library, Violet translated. It sure is lucky that we ran into the two of you, the two twins. I just make up my own things. It sure is lucky that we ran into you two twins. Duncan and Isadora's faces fell, an expression which does not mean that the front of the part of their heads actually fell to the ground. It simply means the two siblings suddenly looked very sad. What's wrong? Klaus asked. Did we say something to upset you? Twins, Duncan said, so softly that the Baudelaires could barely hear him. You are twins, aren't you? Violet asked. You look alike. We're triplets, Isadora said sadly. I'm confused, Violet said. Aren't triplets three people born at the same time? We were three people born at the same time, Isadora explained, but our brother, Quigley, died in the fire that killed our parents. I'm very sorry to hear that, Klaus said. Please forgive our calling you twins. We meant no disrespect to Quigley's memory. Of course you didn't, Duncan said, giving the Baudelaires a small smile. There's no way you could have known. Come on, if you're done with your lasagna, we'll show you the library. And maybe we can find some pieces of metal, Isadora said, for noisy shoes. The Baudelaire orphans smiled, and the five of them bussed their trays and walked out of the cafeteria. The library turned out to be a very pleasant place, but it was not the comfortable chairs, the huge wooden bookshelves, or the hush of people reading that made the three siblings feel so good as they walked into the room. It is useless for me to tell you all about the brass lamps in the shapes of different fish, or the bright blue curtains that rippled like water as the breeze came in from the window, because although these were wonderful things, they were not what made the three children smile. The Quagmire triplets were smiling too, and although I have not researched the Quagmires nearly as much as I have the Baudelaires, I can say with reasonable accuracy that they were smiling for the same reason. It is a relief in hectic, frightening times to find true friends, and it was a relief that all five children were feeling, as the Quagmires gave the Baudelaires a tour of the Prufrock library. Friends can make you feel that the world is smaller and less sneaky than it really is, because you know people who have similar experiences. A phrase here which means having lost their family members in terrible fires and lived in an orphan shack. As Duncan and Isadora whispered to Violet, Klaus and Sunny explained how the library was organized, the Baudelaire children felt less and less distressed about their new circumstances. And by the time Duncan and Isadora were recommending their favorite books, the three siblings thought that perhaps their troubles were coming to an end. At last, they were wrong about this, of course, but for a moment it didn't matter. The Baudelaire orphans had found friends, and as they stood in the library with the Quagmire triplets, the world felt smaller and safer than it had for a long, long time. That is the end of chapter 3. Always leaving us with hope, but we know how that goes. Until chapter 4.
On May 19th.
It's time to grab my life by the wheel.
Hand over your devices.
If he's not giving up his phone, I'm not giving up mine.
Thank you so much. This was a really fun one. We begin by simply listening. Slow down and see just how peaceful today can be. Alright, catch you guys on the flip side.